water, earth, fire, air. Long ago, the four nations lived together in harmony, then everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Only the Avatar, master of all four elements, could stop them, but when the world needed him most, he didn't vanish? Wait, something feels off here. Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, we publish a new video basically every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. The Amagi's reach stretches beyond just this channel, so if you're a fan of us, please consider subscribing to our other channels and following us on all of our social media. Help us reach our goal of passing 100,000 followers on all of our accounts by the end of the year. Today, we're looking into a particular what-if surrounding Aang and his 100-year time skip. I mean, if anyone knows Avatar, they know the phrase, when the world needed him most, he vanished. So what better way to celebrate Avatar's spirit than to just get rid of that, just remove it. Let's look at a world in which the Avatar does not vanish into a block of ice, but instead remains. Grab a fresh glass of the quenchiest cactus juice and pull up a chair, because we're gonna dive straight in. Our story begins with Roku. Well, Wan was the first Avatar, but we're gonna start with Roku. The previous Avatar prior to Aang, Avatar Roku, was born in the Fire Nation and was the best friend of Prince Sozin. I'm sure you know the name, he had a comet named after him, kind of a big deal. Roku and Sozin were very close, even sharing the same birthday, which they often celebrated together. However, on his 16th birthday, Avatar Roku was informed by the Fire Sages that he was the Avatar and needed to begin his training. Sozin informed him that he wasn't allowed to bring anything with him, as the Avatar needed to let go of all earthly possessions, but he gave him his Crown Prince headpiece, that bun ornament you see Roku wear, and said that he hoped they would make an exception for it. From there, Roku traveled the world to study, beginning with the Air Temples, where he learned the bending arts from the nomads and eventually became close with another student named Gyatso. He traveled to the Water Nation to master waterbending and went to the Earth Kingdom where he learned the arts of earthbending from Master Sud. He also managed to learn how to control the Avatar state in the Fire Temple on Crescent Island, where he nearly blew the place up due to his impatience. But he persevered and managed to control it before returning to the Fire Nation proper. It was here that he found Sozin crowned the new Fire Lord after the death of Sozin's father. It had been years since they had seen each other, but the Fire Lord greeted his friend with a hug, as if no time had passed. It wasn't long after that Roku married his childhood sweetheart Ta Min and asked Sozin to be his best man. It was after the wedding that the Fire Lord decided to reveal his plans to his best friend. He said that the Fire Nation was wealthy and strong and that he wanted to spread this good fortune across the world. In truth, Sozin had fallen under the teachings of his father to value power for his nation and planned to begin what would later be known as the 100-Year War under the guise of colonization and empire. Roku quickly rebuked the idea and told Sozin to never bring it up again. This, of course, didn't put an end to Sozin's ambitions, and Sozin began to secretly build up the Fire Nation's military. It wasn't long after that Roku discovered the colonies set up by the Fire Nation in the Earth Kingdom and confronted his best friend about it. After a disagreement and a feeling that the Avatar lacked respect for him, he attempted to attack Roku, only to be quickly defeated because, you know, Avatar. Roku spared Sozin due to their friendship, but stated that such a thing was not to happen again and ordered Sozin to stop expanding his territory. Years later, however, Roku's volcanic home island spontaneously erupted so violently that Sozin could feel it from over 100 miles away. Sozin traveled there to help, and together they attempted to combat the lava, but Roku was taken in by the toxic gases and fell. He begged Sozin to help him, but in a classic Mufasa Scar-type betrayal, Sozin realized that if the Avatar died, the Fire Nation would be free to expand, and he left his former friend to perish. 12 years after Roku's death, Sozin used the power of the comet, which would eventually bear his name, to attack the air nomads in an effort to stop the Avatar by destroying the next group of benders who would bear the Avatar. And this is where our alternate telling of events begins. Aang is born in 12 BG, before genocide of course, and is taken to the Southern Air Temple where he inadvertently chooses the Avatar relics from among thousands of toys, revealing his identity to the monks who keep it secret. Aang was raised at the temple, and a monk who you may remember, Gyatso, chose to be his guardian and sort of parental figure. The two had a very close relationship. At age 12, however, the elders spill the Avatar beans to Aang as they see war coming on the horizon, and they know that the Avatar needs to train like the devil to be able to face off against Sozin and restore balance to the world. Gyatso was the only elder of the council who thought Aang should continue to grow as a normal boy, and so we finally reach our divergence point. According to the canon lore, the council tells Aang of his position and destiny and then ups his training, which Gyatso refuses to enforce. The elders decide Gyatso has become too attached and decide that Aang should be sent away. Aang overhears this, and in a moment of sorrow at being taken away from the only family he's ever had, decides to run away of his own accord. He gets on Appa and flies out over the sea, only to be caught in a horrible storm which nearly drowns him and the Sky Bison. And in a moment of absolute terror, he instinctually awakens the Avatar state and seals himself and Appa into an iceberg for 100 years. However, in classic What If fashion, we're going to ignore the lore and make our own future. Returning to our divergence point, we remember that Aang was informed of his identity by the elders against Gyatso's wishes, but let's say for a moment that Gyatso managed to overturn their decision and have them wait until he was 16 before telling him. Or maybe Gyatso caught up to Aang before he ran away, which he failed to do in the canon timeline, and comfort the boy, telling him, "I won't let them take you from me." Whichever it is, Aang ends up remaining with Gyatso at the Southern Air Temple. It's not long after, however, that Sozin's comet makes its pass, and Sozin and the Fire Nation use its power to utterly eradicate the Airbenders. The Southern Air Temple comes under attack, but Aang is still there. Despite his youth, he is an airbending master, but this isn't enough to halt the army fueled by the comet, especially due to a lack of in-field combat experience. Now, we could go for a very dark path here and just say that Aang dies here, as Katara speculated might have happened. And if that happens, Last Airbender would probably just be Legend of Korra, possibly born as a member of the Foggy Swamp Tribe. But let's keep Aang alive for this what if. After all, if he dies now, he technically vanishes for a time, which would make the title of this video a lie, and I'm not gonna lie to you. I probably would never lie to you about anything important. Unless I really needed to. So anyway, in our what if, Gyatso takes a deadly blow meant for Aang, and in a moment of heartstring-pulling drama, Gyatso tells him that he needs to flee. He informs him that he's the Avatar, and that he's the world's only hope for restoring balance. And so, after Gyatso dies, Aang actually triggers the Avatar state, where he proceeds to lay waste to most of the soldiers attacking the temple. However, he's still overwhelmed and manages to escape on Appa, falling unconscious as he does so. By the time he awakens, he's over the sea, and the sun is shining down through an overcast sky. It was as if a storm had passed by, but Aang had missed it only by a few hours at most. He sits on the edge of Appa's saddle and looks down over the sea sorrowfully. His friends, his culture, his home, and even the one man he saw as a father had all been wiped out by the Fire Nation. He feels a touch of hatred in his heart, but most of it aimed at himself for not being able to save them. He believes that if he had known he were an Avatar from the start, he might have been able to train and have been fully realized by now. For a moment, he believes he hears Gyatso's voice, and in the distance he sees what appears to be gliders. He grows joyous, believing it all to have been a bad dream, but reality sets in as he realizes that those aren't gliders, or the voice of Gyatso, merely a stray flock of albatross flying over the sea. Aang speaks with Appa and pours his heart out to him, only to receive a low grunt in response. Despite this being no known language, every tone means something to Aang, and it's as if Appa's telling him to do what needs to be done. Aang recalls what Gyatso tells him about being the Avatar, and admits that he doesn't know how to be an Avatar, or where to start. He continues to look over the side and realize that he's passing over the Northern Water Tribe. He begins to put two and two together and realizes that if anyone can help him, maybe the Water Tribes could. After all, the Air Nomads couldn't possibly be the only ones to know who the Avatar was, and also any people is probably better than none. He lands there, speaks with the elders, and informs them of all that's happened, and who he is. At first they don't want to believe it, but when reports of Fire Nation warships near the area are revealed, they have no choice but to believe Aang. They proceed to teach him the ways of waterbending. The Fire Nation, still led by a paranoid Sozin who knows that the Avatar is alive after the show Aang put on at the Southern Temple, proceeds to continue the search, knowing that he must surely be near the Water Tribe, as it was known he was headed north after escaping. However, the comet has long since passed by, and they know that they can't succeed in attacking the Northern Water Tribe now after what happened to the Southern Air Temple. This gives Aang time to learn, and for a good time he continues to train until he feels he has a handle on it. Before Aang leaves, however, he's told by the chief of the Northern Water Tribe that he might do well to bide his time. At this time, Sozin would already be 94 years old and surely wouldn't live much longer. There was no need for Aang to rush, so Aang continues his training until he feels he's mastered it, and due to his prodigious nature, he does so quickly within a year. After this, Aang decides it's best for him to head off. He takes his time and heads straight for the Earth Kingdom. The best he could hope for was the city of Omashu, since he knew it well. There, he arrives to find a connection with his old friend, Bumi. Aang had always viewed his friend as a mad genius, and the child's earthbending was incredible for his age. Bumi is pleased to see Aang again and insists on going for a ride again in the Omashu delivery system, which Aang accepts. After this, Bumi turns around to see that Aang isn't as excited as he used to be, and asks what's up. Aang informs Bumi of all the events that have transpired over the course of the previous year. Bumi acknowledges that the grown-ups have been talking about war and how crazy old Sozin was scheming something. Aang also tells Bumi that he needs to train and master the elements so he can restore peace. He mentions he was thinking of letting the world rebalance with the death of Sozin around the corner, but Bumi displays his own characteristic brand of wisdom by asking Aang why he thinks the war will end if Sozin dies. And he informs Aang that currently there's a prince in the capital of the Fire Nation named Azulon who was recently born, and will eventually take his father's place and continue his will. Aang is a little frightened by this, but then doubles down on his desire to find a proper earthbending teacher, and Bumi immediately volunteers for the job. Aang finds that this is the perfect opportunity to learn the same mad skills as his close friend, and gleefully accepts. However, Aang finds it far harder to learn this type of bending than he did with water. As Toph and Katara explained in the original show, earthbending is the direct opposite of Aang's native style. More often than not, Aang would find it more that the rocks were moving him instead of the other way around. Instead of moving in the flow of the element that he had with airbending, he needed to go against the flow if he ever wished to command such a stubborn element. Bumi taught Aang the technique and stance to take on, to adopt the unmoving properties of Earth. Under his tutelage, Aang began to get a hold of it. However, it's taken him over 3 years to properly master earthbending to the point that he believed it was as easy as water or airbending. And by this time, the war was in full swing. The Fire Nation had taken a lot of territory on the Western Front and was quickly spreading. Aang eventually leaves Omashu behind, but to his surprise, Bumi decides to come along with him. He tells Aang that he and the Mad Genius are like brothers, and that he wouldn't let Aang face this alone. However, they need to find a firebending teacher, but they have no idea where to start. Aang knows he needs to learn, so the first thing he does is consider the only person in the Fire Nation that he trusts, and the first name that comes to mind is Kuzan. While flying, Bumi continues to ask more about Kuzan, and Aang recounts him with the story of how they saved a dragon's egg from poachers, and Bumi makes some sort of characteristic joke about a poached egg. They land behind enemy lines in the Fire Nation. Aang and Bumi disguise themselves to keep from being recognized and proceed to look for Kuzan, who they eventually find. Aang tells Kuzan about what's happened to him, and Kuzan agrees to help him, though he doesn't believe he'll be of much help, as he isn't the best bender in the world, and against someone like Sozin, or possibly the now 4-year-old Azulon, unless they plan to take the kid out now, he won't be much help. Aang refuses the thought of killing a 4-year-old and proceeds to ask more about potentially being taught. Kuzan proceeds to help Aang learn the basics, but there's no chance he can ever master it from Kuzan, who just doesn't have the ability to teach him adequately. So Aang proceeds to stress over what he's supposed to do. He sits and meditates on this. He finds an old shrine and he sits before it. He wishes he could speak with Gyatso again and ask for his advice, but knows that he's unable to. At this point, he hears a voice call out to him. He opens his eyes to see the spirit of Avatar Roku standing before him. Roku proceeds to tell him about Crescent Island and the sages there, who await the next Avatar. When Aang awakens, he wonders if it was just a dream, but feels it was too vivid. With Kuzan and Bumi by his side, he proceeds to head to Crescent Island, where the sages graciously welcome the Avatar. While there, they mention how they awaited him ever since the death of Roku. They also mention how many of the sages have been threatened or even executed for professing loyalty to the Avatar, but they've secretly remained loyal to the Avatar all the same. And the masters there proceed to teach Aang. They help both him and Kuzan strengthen their firebending abilities, as well as helping Aang master the Avatar state as they helped Roku do in the past. This takes time, however, and Aang finds that he's there for 2 years secretly learning under the sages. It's then that Aang believes he's completely mastered the elements as well as the Avatar state, becoming a fully realized Avatar. But to his sorrow, he's informed by Roku that he'll likely have to kill Sozin. Aang at first refuses this, as it's against his pacifist nature, but Roku tells him that he spared Sozin once and nothing came of it but sorrow for the world. He tells Aang that it's the only way. Aang, Bumi, and Kuzan leave Crescent Island and make their way to the Fire Nation capital, which is becoming a very fortified city under Sozin's command. In disguise, they continue into the capital, where they realize just how brainwashed the Fire Nation people are. The history of everything before Sozin's reign has been destroyed. Sozin is portrayed as a godlike being, and what infuriates Aang the most, the air nomads are portrayed as having possessed an army despite being a pacifist culture that was ambushed. It's at this time that they begin to think about their battle with Sozin in earnest. Kuzan asks why they don't just let the old man die, but Bumi and Aang say that his will would pass on to his son. But then Kuzan asks how that would change if they killed him now. Aang says he believes it's possible that Sozin could live for years longer and could further indoctrinate his people and his son. He says that he believes if he can manage to defeat Sozin before Azulon can reach an age to understand what his father actually stands for, they may yet be able to save the nation. He insists that with Sozin's defeat, the Fire Sages could guide the young prince to peace. Kuzan then mentions that the biggest issue is getting in to defeat Sozin in the first place. After all, he's guarded by elite soldiers, and there are plenty of officers left who would continue his will. Aang says that he's pretty sure he can defend himself, but worries about Kuzan and Bumi. Bumi states that he won't let Aang go alone, and volunteers himself and Kuzan to take out the generals prior to the next war meeting. Aang asks how they'll do it, and Bumi just smiles. They take 3 sets of armor off the unconscious bodies of Fire Nation soldiers and proceed to make their way to the castle. As they pass through, they listen around and bide their time until the next war meeting is called. Kuzan and Bumi set off to deal with the officers, while Aang sets off to deal with Sozin. By the time he reaches the throne room, he finds Sozin. Upon removal of his helmet, Sozin immediately recognizes Aang as the successor of Roku. He claims he knew this day would come and tries to play off of Aang's pacifist nature, claiming he's too weak and a shell of his former self. He asks if Aang remembers their friendship and all the good times, but Aang doesn't. Sozin appears hurt by this and proceeds to profusely apologize to Aang. Aang is almost taken in by it, but Sozin at the last minute double-crosses him and proves that he's still as powerful of a firebender as he ever had been, and the throne room is engulfed in flames as the battle begins. Aang holds his own, however, and with the Avatar state that he's had the proper time to train and master without great incident, manages to defeat Sozin. However, Aang can't bring himself to kill him, it just isn't in his nature. He tells Sozin that so long as Aang is alive, he will not allow Sozin to continue his evil scheme. He tells him to withdraw his troops and declare the war's end. He also tells him to stop the propaganda and to start telling the truth again to his people, or else, Aang would. Sozin happily agrees, which seems a bit suspect. Of course, as Aang attempts to leave, Sozin releases one last attack, which Aang deflects. Striking one of the last remaining pillars in the room that had survived from their fight, the throne room ceiling comes crashing down, Aang just narrowly avoiding it. Aang tries to dig out Sozin, but it's far too late. Sozin curses Aang with his dying breath, asking why he couldn't have just seen it his way all those years ago. Aang realizes that he was speaking to Roku and not Aang at present, but continues to listen. Eventually, Sozin perishes. Meanwhile, Kuzan and Bumi were working on the generals. Bumi wanted to merely go in and crush them, but Kuzan thought it would be better to do things a bit more cunning, and instead place something in their drinks to cause them to pass out. After this, the war is declared at an end, as most of the brains behind the fighting have been captured, the Fire Lord is dead, and all that was left behind was a 6-year-old ruler who was too young to even understand that they were truly at war. The sages would have come in, as Aang said, and would help guide the young ruler, and as time passes, everything would slowly return to normal. Aang would return to an empty southern temple where he would hope to rebuild his culture, and eventually, peace would be restored. At least that's what we think would happen. Aang, Bumi, and Kuzan probably also would have had plenty of wacky one-off adventures together, ideally more of the secret tunnel variety and less, Great Divide. But for the sake of brevity and not regaling you with a 5-hour fanfiction video, we figured it'd be best to limit ourselves. Obviously, we can't be certain what would have happened if Aang didn't run. Like we said, it's more than likely that Korra, the Foggy Swamp Tribe version, obviously would have happened, as Aang probably would have died. But if he did survive, this is our take on what would have happened, and the best chance they had at defeating the Fire Nation. But that's just us, so let us know with a comment if you have a different vision. If you liked the video, feel free to click that thumbs up button. If you haven't subscribed, the red button, it looks like this. You know what to do with that, right? Don't forget to ring the bell as well for notifications whenever new videos drop. Peace, Hotman.